Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to bring you the American College of Physicians Maryland chapter is very excited to bring you the Navigating the Residency interview. We have three stellar faculty members who are giving the presentations. We're going to start off with Dr. Natasha Cheda. She's the assistant professor of medicine. She's a program director of the Osler Medical Residency Program at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. We will then follow with Dr. Sapna Kheel, who's the program director in internal medicine at the Accession St. Agnes Medical Center in Baltimore, Maryland. And we finish our day today with Dr. Dobin Chow, who's the associate professor of medicine, program director of internal medicine residency and transitional medicine residency at the University of Maryland Medical Center Midtown campus. And he's also the chief of medicine, chair of internal medicine at the Midtown campus. So these are our three speakers. Dr. Cheda is going to start off with talking about post-interview processing, and we'll follow that with the pre-interview preparation and the interview day. Uh, all questions, if you don't mind putting it in the chat, and we'll answer all the questions in the end.
All right. So I actually, just before this, was having a hard time getting to my computer, but I just got in. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I apologize that this is a bit out of order, because I think typically you would think to talk about post-interview processes as the last topic. I just have some childcare issues that I need to attend to. So I wanted to make sure I was able to speak fully before we moved on to our next. So apologize that this is sort of the last part of the process that you're going to hear about first. But what I'm going to talk a little bit about is common questions that we get regarding post-interview processes. And so I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about expectations, and then I wanted to answer any questions we had, but I think we're going to save them till the end, actually. So I'll be on as long as I can to answer any that I have, but I'm just going to share my screen here. So I just wanted to make one comment on post-interview communication and what the NRMP says about post-interview communication and expectations from programs around this. So, the purpose of post-interview communication, I don't want to say rules because that sounds a little bit too strict, but guidance from the NRMP is to protect applicants. So we know that when programs are sort of reaching out to applicants and trying to express how interested they are and express how much they enjoyed meeting you. Often that feels great for the applicants, and that's good for your overall, I think, general sense of how things are going. But it can also lead to applicants feeling unduly pressured, and can also lead to questions being asked of applicants that they shouldn't have to answer. So in the spirit of trying to protect applicants and make sure the process is as equitable as possible, the NRMP has recommended that post-interview communication be limited. And they basically are trying to avoid people feeling pressured about giving answers about ranking or how they like the program, where else they're applying, et cetera, things like that. And so what they say is that the recruitment team can exchange clarifying information with applicants following an interview. So say you had a question about the program, the recruitment team would obviously answer that for you. But the recruitment team should not be soliciting or requiring post-interview communications with applicants for the purpose of influencing ranking. So, if you think about it from a program view, right? So, I reach out to Sapna saying, we really love meeting you. You're at the top of our list. What is my purpose in doing that? My purpose in doing that is not to help her. My purpose in doing that is to help my program by trying to sort of make her feel like she might want to come to us because we're giving her all this positive regard. And so as, again, it might feel good for you, but the goal of programs doing that is often to the benefit of the program, not to the benefit of the applicant. And that's why this guidance is there. I will say also, if you experience issues where people are engaging in post-interview communication with you and you feel uncomfortable, or you're being asked about ranking, asked about where else you're applying, et cetera, there is a way to report that on the NRMP website. And I would encourage you to do so, because all programs are aware of this guidance. And if programs are reaching out and asking about ranking, we need to know so that they can have the appropriate follow-up from the NRMP around that. So again, we can keep this a safe process for all of our applicants. So you should feel free to reach out if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have things that you want to clarify, if you want to meet with faculty, you should feel free to do that. But what a program should not be doing is reaching out to you and sort of trying to gauge where you're going to rank them and stuff like that. Let me just see if it'll let me go to the next slide. Okay. Going on about this, so what is the AIM says, which is their Alliance of Academic Internal Medicine, which is the body that sort of governs us as program directors in internal medicine. It actually is a little bit more stringent. And they ask each program to state if they're going to engage in post-interview communication and to rely on best practices. So for example, what I do at all of our interview days is I say, we do not engage in post-interview communication. Do not take a lack of email from us to mean that we're not interested. We absolutely are, but you're not going to hear from us. I state that so people aren't like, why didn't I hear? They must not love me. So if a program is going to engage in post-interview communication, just to like follow up with you, they should tell you, like, we will be engaging in post-interview communication, et cetera. And again, like they recommend that programs don't say things like you're highly ranked or you're ranked to match or things like that. Because again, the goal is there is to really more pressure applicants. So one question that always comes up, common questions about post-interview processes is, should I send a thank you note? And I'll say that I don't think sending a thank you note gets you into a program. I especially think if a program says, please do not send thank you notes, I would believe them. It's not a game. They're not trying to trick you. I say in our interview days, please do not send thank you notes. We know that you're thankful to be here. We know you spent the day with us, so clearly you're interested. So do not worry about sending us thank you notes, because honestly, like, it's extra time for you, it's extra time for us, and we are all in the same boat of trying to figure out where you want to go, right? So believe people when they say don't send a thank you note. If they don't say that and you want to send a thank you note, do feel free. I don't think it's necessarily going to change where you are with the program. And I think between email or paper, honestly, I think paper, often if you send it, like, we don't get it until maybe even after the match has happened. So if you're going to send a thank you note, I would do it via email. But again, I don't know if that's actually, I mean, every program will speak for themselves, but I don't think it's necessarily an expectation. And I wouldn't agonize over what you're supposed to say in your thank you note. If you think that you loved a program, you don't know if the interview went very well, etc., I think that you can tell a program, hey, I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed interviewing with you. Express your interest. That's completely fine. And tell them exactly why. I think if you're going to reach out to a program to tell them why you liked them, don't just say I liked them. Give them specific examples of what makes the program a good fit for you. You see the possibility for great mentorship. You really love the patient population. There's a specific track, etc., things like that. So you can, if you think the interview went well, but you really like the program, you can reach out to the program and just say that you really enjoyed the experience and sort of express your interest. Some people ask if my paper or poster gets accepted after you've interviewed. Feel free to reach out to the recruitment team and tell them. Again, I don't know if this necessarily shifts things remarkably in folks' favor, but if you want to share that, it's perfectly fine. And we do make note of that and sort of keep track. And then people will ask often, can you express a preference? Does it help? I'll say that if you think about it just from the practicality of the match, programs should rank the applicants in the order they want, and applicants should rank programs in the order they want, because that is what is best for the program and best for the applicants. The match favors the applicant, and that it will go to your preferences and then to the program preferences as part of the match. It doesn't make sense for program directors to say, hey, this person is going to rank us number one. They're number 100 on our list because they told us they're going to rank us number one. We're going to move them up. That doesn't make sense because you're already going to rank them number one anyway. So whether they move you around or not, you're still going to want to come. So I don't think that doing that necessarily makes a huge change of where you are on a rank list. What it does do, I think, is just tell programs that you're seriously interested. Everyone might feel good about themselves, but I don't think that this is, again, a make or break thing. I think it's kind of like the thank you note. It's sort of, if you want to do it, feel free. I don't think this necessarily changes where you're going to be on a rank list. If you are going to reach out, I would say reach out to your number one, but do not reach out to other programs and say you're in our top, because what that means to them is we're not number one, and why are you contacting me, right? Reach out to the program that's number one. Do not reach out to programs that are not your number one and say you're ranking them number one, because doesn't happen often enough that programs won't remember, meaning that that's fairly uncommon that people do that. So like we remember when people do that, and it does not reflect well on you to reach out to multiple programs to say you're ranking them number one. And then again, I think how do you handle programs that are not really violating the NRMP guidance, but they're hinting? I think the best thing to do is talk to one of your mentors, show them the language that you're receiving, show them the email or whatever the contact is, and say, hey, am I interpreting this the right way? Do you feel like they're pressuring, whatnot? If the mentor or whoever you show it to agrees, like this is a little inappropriate, go ahead and report it to NRMP. NRMP will deal with it. And if they don't think that it was a violation, then that's fine. If they do, the program will get guidance on how to conduct themselves differently. But I do think, there's a lot of gray in these sorts of communications, and email is hard to sometimes interpret with tone and things like that. And so if you have an email that just makes you feel not quite right, I would just show it to someone else and say, like, what do you think? And based on their guidance, move forward from there. I think those are my basic review. And I'm going to stay as long as I can, and happy to take any questions for as long as I can.
Thank you, Dr. Chheda. Should we go, Sapna? Good to go. That's a very nice photograph.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of this process, trying to stick to a little bit of the questions that we commonly get. And just want to thank everybody, especially Dr. Chow and Dr. Sharma for sharing some of their materials. So taking you back to the beginning and sort of getting into the residency, it's often not a 100-meter dash, but quite a bit of a marathon. And it does take a long process, as you're well aware. The timeline has probably started for many of you, and you've been working on your personal statements, applying, and many of you may have already gotten your ERAS tokens and are gathering things, getting ready to submit to the programs. September 6th is when we do start, and as you are well aware, also September 15th is when NRMP opens. So make sure that you register separately for this. And then the process continues into September, end of September, when programs download their applications, invitations for interviews go out, typically in October, November. The bulk of them, you can continue to be getting invitations later on. The interviews typically tend to be between November to January, the rank lists, and then match days, March 15th, as far as we know right now. I just want to briefly talk because there have been quite a few questions about the new MyERAS application for 2024. As many of you know, it is a lengthy application, and so I just have a couple of hints or ideas for completing the ERAS application. Some of the common things we see where it may not be as clear is the experiences. Sometimes people have a large number of experiences, and it's difficult to distinguish between them. So if you have a volunteer versus paid experience, that might be helpful. If you were appointed or selected for a specific position or for a grant or something that's of value, please do let us know and explain that. I think overall, though, in your description, it's helpful to state facts and minimize descriptors in your experience areas. All experiences, when possible, you have a box to list the hours per week involved. I find that very helpful because sometimes there are so many experiences that are overlapping in timeline, and I'm not quite sure what did you do with what. If you did an observership versus you were actually seeing patients, writing up the history, doing the physical exam, writing a note in the EMR, all those specific things you may have done is very helpful for us to see. what your experiences are, especially for international graduates who may be learning the U.S. medical system. Of course, when you list submitted, accepted versus published manuscripts, it's helpful if you can be clear about those. And lastly, just a tip about hobbies. You know, I sometimes see people writing, watch Netflix, and that may be what you do to relax, but perhaps what we are looking for in the hobbies is sometimes your passion, your driving interest. Perhaps you blog about your favorite sport, or you may be engaged in some other activity. That might be very useful here. So the new MyERAS application, this is replacing that supplemental application that has been present for the last few years. And it has 3 specific sections. Remember, this is an optional application, so you can just do your main ERAS application and not do this part, though I would say that this is an important piece that most program directors are now starting to look at as well. So let me talk through these kind of briefly, and then I'm happy to answer questions towards the end. So the first part to recognize is that that the main areas that they're asking you is one, geographic location, where your training settings are, and that you are allowed to preference signal 7 programs, including your home program this time around. So in that prior work, volunteer, and research experience, the idea behind this area was that in the regular ERAS application, people may end up listing many 10s and 20, 30, 40 experiences, and it was very difficult for program directors reviewing to tell which were the most meaningful experiences. And so here, what are your 3 for most meaningful experiences should be carefully chosen, because you're most likely to have those viewed by the reviewer. And this is an important section often for holistic reviews when you have large volumes of applications that are being reviewed by programs. In the geographic preference area, studies have shown that the #1 reason is certainly in the past for applicants to pick a program was geography. So location is something no program can change about themselves, but it is very helpful for you to match to the area that you want to be in. And so sharing your preference can really be very helpful so that you are appropriately matched and fairly matched to what your preferences are. So how does that work? You have to communicate regional preference. You can select up to 3 of the 9 regions and share information about this, and you can give a short explanation for why you chose this. Now, some of you may look at this and say, as I do, I wouldn't say Maryland and Florida would be in the same region, but they are, and in this one. And so it is helpful if you can put in your explanation what is the reason for your preference. And if you don't have a preference, no region preference, or do not wish to communicate a preference is also okay. Signaling, you are allowed to signal 7 programs for internal medicine. What does a signal mean? Signal means that you're sharing a genuine interest in a program, that this is somewhere where you want to be based on all the information you have as you're applying. Remember, programs can see whether applicants signal their program, but they cannot see who else you signaled. And you can see, the programs can see all the supplemental information you provided. And remember, preferences are not binding. just some quick things, like now jumping from the supplemental app to reminding you about writing the personal statement, that to make sure that you have understand its purpose. It is that very small piece of real estate that you have as an applicant to tell me exactly about yourself. This is where you have the freedom to let me know what makes you who you are. With that being said, don't take any crazy chances. I think sometimes you don't know what the reader will be on the other side. And so that's just my 2 cents. And make sure, of course, that you have it spell checked and read multiple times. And the traditional template for this is to sort of think about an impactful experience, maybe why it sparked an interest in internal medicine, why you want to do this, what has fueled that fire, maybe some specific examples of how that interest matured during medical school. And then how do you foresee your future? Again, it's not binding, but if you have a specific interest beyond your training, immediate training, please let us know. Letters of recommendation, again, of course, it's important to think about whom, how, what, when to ask. We'll just briefly tell you, ask from faculty who know you well, who you worked with directly. Those letters can be a lot more personal. And in the ideal format, you want to meet with your faculty, share your CV, maybe a draft of your personal statement, perhaps even specific patients or people you may have worked with. If you remember, I was on the team with you when Dr. Johnson was the senior resident, and we had this amazing patient. That might kind of connect people. And make sure you give ample time to your letter writers, and also let them know what types of programs you're applying to, etc. Selecting programs to apply to, of course, geography, again, is very important because you may want to make sure you have a personal support system. You want to look at the curricula, the offerings, what are the strengths of that program? Are there research opportunities that, if that specifically is important to you? And then certainly locations, large versus small programs. Know yourself. Some of you thrive in a small, personalized environment. Some of you find that you want the diversity of people and experiences that are more important in a larger program. So sort of look at all those factors closely and recognize that we have to be a little bit honest about ourselves and see what are we most competitive for. And please make sure you get guidance from faculty or others on what might be the most suitable programs for you. It is important where you ultimately end up training, because what has been found is that a lot of folks end up staying in the geographic area where they train. I don't know if this will continue in the coming years, but that has certainly held true in the past. Where residents train correlates with where they practice at. Quick view from the other side, and I may just be speaking for myself, but we have a certain methodology when we are looking at applicants for interviews. The challenge, as you could well know, is that many programs get many thousands of applications and have a limited time and resources to review applications. So screening does happen, as though many programs do their level best to do more of a holistic review on after they've screened down the programs to a slightly smaller number. PDs may need to get to a final number of applications to read and number of interviewees to invite. medical school may matter. It depends on the program. It depends on how their prior experiences have been in taking people from that school. Typically, your applications are reviewed either by the program director, associate program director. There might, in larger programs, there might be a group of individuals who review applications. And recognize that ultimately when programs are deciding, they're looking to often create a very diverse class, diverse in terms of culture, interests, backgrounds, experiences, etc. So this is just a little bit of data from the NRMP survey results, and looking at the mean numbers of applications received, interview invitations, interviews, and applicants ranked. So if here the mean is about 18, and then the number of applications received is 2,876, you can see that there are some applications that are rejected based on some standardized criteria, then applications that may receive a holistic review, then interviews sent, interviewed, and then ranked. So virtual interviews, I think I might get a little bit here and then turn it over to Dobbin. I'm just to remind you to prepare for this interview, just like anything else, as they are, I think still this year, the plan is for mostly virtual interviews. I'm not sure if some programs will go in person, but the vast majority should be virtual. Please make sure you have good internet access where you do end up deciding to do the interview, and test the technology beforehand. Charge your devices, keep pets away. I do remember last year I was interviewing someone and I could hear a rooster crowing at the back because they were in a different time zone, and they were apologizing for the rooster. Don't worry about that. That's not something you do control, but do your best to find a quiet spot and set a professional background. Camera position does matter. You want to make sure that it's an optimal setup. And the location does make a difference, and lighting, as you can see, I'm in a little bit of a dark space today, but if you can have good bright light on your face, that's very important. Looking downwards as eye level makes a big difference in terms of your projecting your best side of the face in terms of interviews. And to minimize any kind of distractions, turning off cell phones, disabling these apps. Sometimes you may have apps that are reporting out or are showing up, or you might be someone who gets distracted by seeing your own self on the screen. So you might want to hide your video so that you can give the full attention to the interviewer and not be watching yourself so much. And be prepared for short notice interviews, or if that's important to you. And to practice, if you can, record yourself. Make sure that you think of some of the common and behavioral interview questions that you might be asked. And in general, you don't want to be over-rehearsed. You still want to be present and authentic in your answers. And the last thing is maybe something to just consider, that your most preferred programs, you may want to wait to interview with them after you've had a little bit of practice. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Chow to talk to you further about the interview process and acing the interview. Dr. Chow?
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Dr.
Summary. But maybe we can pause for a second, and we can ask the program directors to comment on the signaling, because I think that's it's not written in stone how programs will respond to being signaled or not signaled. So and I struggle with how to advise students. Now the students have 7 signals, and so you could be I'm sure you all are good students, but you probably have a ranking of programs. There'll be some programs that are extremely elite, very, very competitive. The ones that are very, very, very hard to match to. There'll be some that are maybe a little bit on the next tier, maybe a little bit not as competitive, and there'll be ones for which you're more likely to match to. And so, what if you use all 7 signals on the Ivy League programs, the ones that are extremely, extremely competitive? Then you don't have any signals to the ones that, and of course you would like to go to those, I guess. That it'd be nice to match to those. What if you don't have any that you would then extend to the ones that are you're more likely to match to? How would you as a program director respond to a applicant who does not signal you, but for whom that applicant, in your view, seems to be a competitive candidate? Sapna, have you thought about that?
I have. I mean, I think it's difficult to predict from year to year, since the signaling is fairly new, and I am still, as many other program directors, gaining experience through the signaling process. This is my 3rd year with the signaling process. In the first year, I wasn't sure how to use the signals well. I interviewed some of the folks who signal me, and not a lot of them matched to my program. Last year, I had a large number of my signals matched to my program. So I found it very, very useful in the sense of finding people who had already researched my program, were interested in coming, and ended up doing well enough in the interviews, and ended up not needing to go as far down my rank list. So I think from my standpoint, my advice would be to have a few that are your high-end programs that might be more of a reach for you, a few in the middle, and a couple of safe ones, because that's probably the best way to position yourself.
So talking about signaling, since we broke off for signaling, they also asked, and I think you covered the strategic signaling advice already. And then one of them did touch upon the impact of not signaling any program or any geographic location. So do you want to comment on that, Dr. Hill?
I think that's not having a geographic preference is okay. I think that just means that you're willing to come to our program regardless of where we're located. Of course, if you do have a local connection, that is something that's one of the things that might sometimes make us lean over towards you, if all things were equal. But I think that if you don't have a preference, or you have a preference to another location, then you should try to express that and let people know why you have the preference for that location. Ultimately, the more information you can provide allows both sides to make the best decision possible.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I think Natasha wanted to make a comment. Is it okay if I call you Natasha?
Yes, please. No, I was just going to comment, and I'm trying to remember if this is, because I'm getting confused now between fellowship and residency. But at least for fellowship, so I think this is the same for residency, you can either leave the section blank or you can select no geographic preference. On the program side, if you select no geographic preference, we see that. But if you leave it blank, it could mean to us either that you didn't signal the geography that our program is located in, or you left it blank. So my recommendation would be is if you really have no preference, select no preference. If you have preferences, select them as well. But if you just leave it blank, the program could either they might interpret it as we weren't in one of your geographic locations, because if you select geographic locations, only the programs in that geographic location can see it. If that makes sense. So it's a little bit about like what you're implying if you leave it blank. So I would actually suggest not doing that. And if you really have no preference, just selecting no preference. The other thing I was just going to mention is in terms of the signaling programs, I think as Sapna had said, it's hard for us all, I think, to really interpret a lot of that these days. But for me personally, I think the idea that someone would say they want to come to my program before they've even interviewed with us is also sort of hard, right? Because they don't really know anything about the program yet. They haven't interviewed. So I don't take it to mean much if people didn't put us in their 7, just because you haven't interviewed with us yet. It might change afterwards. I do think what programs are doing, though, if you look at the data from NRMP, is they're really using that information more when they're trying to figure out between interviewing people. If they have 2 applicants who are very, 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 very similar, and one signaled the geographic location and one didn't, and they don't have any other way to decide who to interview, that's where they may use the signaling. So it's really not being used post the interview process. What it's really being used is during the interview process, I think, when people are trying to decide who to interview, if you look at the national data.
Good. Thank you. There isn't a standard for all programs to how to handle this information, and programs handle it differently. And I was a little bit taken aback by one program director who said that this past year, the only people he interviewed were people who signaled his program as a preference. I said, wow. I said to myself, wow, that's not how we did things. And because then then I realized for the people who applied to his program who did not signal him, but were great applicants for his program, he didn't even interview them, never met them. So at any rate, I mentioned this to you all because there's not a consistent way of all programs to use this data, and to be thoughtful about that. I'll tell you what, for our program, I have to say, I don't look at the signal to our program that much. I look at the geographic preference. Hey, look, I'm in Baltimore, all right, and so if there's people out in California who apply to our program, I always say to myself, what are they doing? They could be they could be surfing in La Jolla, or they could be in Baltimore slugging it out in the trenches. And why would they want to come to Baltimore? So I almost dismissed applicants who were from California, from the West Coast. They probably grew up there. They have family out there. Baltimore's a foreign country to them. I've had applicants from Hawaii. I never interviewed anyone from Hawaii. You gotta be kidding me. You got the choice between, Honolulu or Baltimore. Which harbor do you want to be in? Well, at any rate, now with the geographical preference, they can say, I've got a significant other who's going to law school in Washington, D.C., and we want to live in between. Or I have I have family in Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore. That. So it's anyways. I think geographic signaling makes a difference. On the other hand, say if you don't have a geographic preference, you're given the opportunity to write something like, I have no geographical preference. My focus is on finding a program that best meets my educational needs, and that's fine to say. Okay, in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and
yes, thank you.
Dr. Deepak, are you trying to push me along here?
No, I was just trying to get your attention so that you would move ahead with your presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, Sapna, are you going to advance the slide here?
Sure.
All right. So go ahead. Who do you have to impress? Everyone from the and it's the coordinator who extends you the invitation, and of course it's less stressful for you if you know what to expect on the interview day, meaning who are you going to meet, what faculty perhaps you'll be interviewing with. Some programs will give you that information, some don't. That's okay. We'll go over this. So at this point, if you've been invited, then you've made the cut all the way down from 4,000 people like the Sapness program down to 200. Now she's trying to sort out among those 200 where people be positioned on this rank list that she's going to concoct. So the personality makes a difference. Connection with her and her team make a difference. So what the program is trying to learn is, okay, you've made the cut in terms of your academic qualifications, your professional potential, but are you a good fit for the team? Are you someone who's going to work well in their setting? So we're going to go over some of these questions. Go ahead. Interviewers will prefer thinking about potential over performance. If you spend your time talking about the stuff that you've done, talking about performance, their eyes will sort of glaze over. That's a little bit boring. But if you get them to think about what it is that you can do for their program, what your future in that program looks like, they'll begin to imagine things. And that's more fun for them. Okay, next. All right. So, you know what? You should look good. You should dress well. And so one person was just said it half kidding. He said, "Hey, I'm going to wear a suit and tie, but I'm going to wear my scrubs for my pants because no one's going to see the pants." No, wear your best dress shoes. Wear your dress pants. You know why? You'll feel whole. You'll feel committed. You feel that you're there in your entirety. You feel like you're not holding anything back. You're not concealing anything. You want to be genuine. Okay, so go ahead. Next. Okay. So they'll usually start out. They want to say hello to you. They'll say, "Hey, what led you to apply to this program?" And so have something in mind. What are your goals? How will our training assist you in meeting them? So you have to know the program a little bit, research the program. This is a common question that you'll get. I don't like this question. I don't ask it. What are your strengths and weaknesses? You'll be asked, and you'll have to come up with something. Now, your strengths are easy, right? You guys have a lot of strengths. What are your weaknesses? That's a tough one, right? Now, there are these questions that are they ask you for some to recall an experience, and so they'll say something like, "Tell me of a time when you made a difference for a patient, or you made a great diagnosis, or you did something extraordinary." And what does that do? Because the greatest predictor of how you're going to perform in the future is how you performed in the past. So they'll ask you to talk about some past experiences, and so have some of that in your pocket. What challenges have you faced in medical school? What would you do different if you had to do medical school over? I could tell you, I could go on for an hour about that. What advice would you give to a new student entering your school? Okay, so these are behavioral questions, and this is becoming much more common and much more the norm. And so behavioral questions, go ahead. So tell me about a time, and these are all these questions where they try to look at some past experiences because it helps portend what future experiences are going to be like. So think about these kinds of questions and think about how you might respond. Now, you'll get a question in which they probe at maybe a time that something didn't go well. There was a failure, and the key here is to take that story and take that area of weakness, take that mistake, and turn it into a strength. So, for example, there was something where you maybe misread an EKG, and you felt bad about that. But then you realized, hey, this is an area of weakness. You went home 3 weeks. You spent with your head immersed in the EKG book, and now it's become one of your strengths. And you feel very proud of how well you can do reading EKGs. So these behavioral questions are something that you'll see. Sometimes they will link to the program's skills or core value. So they'll try to link a behavioral question to concepts of resilience, to motivation, to conflict. Okay, next. All right, the typical interview is with a faculty member. It may last 20 or 30 minutes, but then there's this phenomenon of speed dating, which I really didn't know much about, but Sapna seems to know a lot about it and have a lot of experience with it. But this is where you have like 10 minutes with a faculty member, and they ask you a question. Then you move on to another faculty member, and then the previous faculty member asks the same question to the next applicant. So one faculty member might ask the same question 8 different times to 8 different residents, and so it's a. And to be honest, we haven't done this in our program, but it does occur. You'll see it, and some programs really like it. Group interviewing is where there's a group of residents and then a group of faculty, and it's how you interact with your other. And so they're not quite your residents; these are applicants. But what is the group dynamic? How you interact as a member of the group? It's I think that's very challenging. But some programs do it. If you tend to let it happen, there will be some very outspoken people in that group who dominate the discussion, and then you feel like you don't get a word in edgewise, and that's maybe not to your benefit. On the other hand, you don't want to feel like you're pushing yourself out there either. Some programs will have residents participate in interviews. Do not let your guard down. That's just as important interview as with faculty. Don't feel like you can say, okay, let me tell you why I really applied to this program. Don't do that. Next. All right, so
this is the last one.
Okay, there's they may begin with a question like, tell me about yourself. I'll bet over 50% of applicants interviews the faculty member will say, oh, tell me about yourself. That's a tough question to answer. So there's a YouTube video that's from the editor of Harvard Business Review, Christine Liu. And I encourage you to, all you do is you go to YouTube and you visit, you enter under the search, tell me about yourself. And her video will pop up. It's a very nice video. She talks about how to answer that question. She does it from a business interview perspective, but I think it's all applicable. But she wants you to think about how to answer that question in a way that it makes the interviewer more interested in you as a person. They may ask you to tell them about an interesting case. So have a case in your pocket, in case they ask. And then finally, everyone will always ask the question, do you have any questions for me? All right. Don't have canned questions. Don't say stuff like, how are residents evaluated? I must have gotten that 100 times last year. I don't know, from some website. Or they'll ask, if you had all the money in the world, how would you change your program? If I had all the money in the world, would I be on changing programs? I don't think so. But I don't know. Instead, try to ask questions that are related to that program. You ask, how can I contribute to performance improvement and patient safety at your hospital? all of a sudden that kind of question turns the focus around. It's not all about you, what you've done, how great you are. Now it's about the program. How can I contribute? How can I make the program better? How do residents how do residents do that? How do you contribute to the culture of the program? So now you're trying to show that you're someone who's giving, not taking. Your interest is to improve the program, and that's how that's the legacy that you're gonna leave if you're a resident there. Okay, I'll stop because I can see Dr. Deepak is looking at me with staring eyes. I apologize for going off for so long. Thanks.
No. Thank you. That was very informative, Dr. Chow. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. I've kind of piled it. So a couple of questions regarding the IMG specific questions. So one of them is, how do you do concise, meaningful ERAS application in terms of what are the 10 experiences? Like when you say list 10 experiences, would you emphasize US experiences versus experiences in your own country? That was a question. Then there was also a question which I think Dr. Christmas answered about if you're doing elective rotations in the US during your medical school from another country as an IMG, then does that go under education and training or volunteer experiences? So if you could, any of you could answer either of these questions, greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you pick the experience based on how important and meaningful that experience was for you. Whether that experience was in the U.S., whether it was in another country, I would like to hear more about how that experience made you the person that you are, how it changed you. It's that gives insight into the person. Don't look for these experience questions as a way to impress the faculty. It's not about that. It's about you trying to show the best image of yourself, and a true image of yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Focus on the experience and what it taught you. What did you get out of it? It doesn't matter where you did it.
Got it. And then what would you, any of y'all as a PD, would look out in an IMG?
Just generally what I would look for?
Yeah, just one or two things, like something that would stand out. Or we can shelve that and go for something else.
Yeah, I don't know even how to answer that question because there's so many different experiences, trends that each person brings. And we look for a lot of variety.
The next question is, how can a prospective applicant think and improve their CV to contribute for a particular program? Like Dr. Chow just said, how would you contribute to the future of that residency program? So
yeah, but I'm not sure you would change or alter your CV related to that question. Your CV is your CV, and it is what it is. I don't know that I would alter or make different changes in it. Now, there are a lot of ways that residents contribute to a program, and you wish. I would hope that you wish that you could, when you finish the residency, that you leave a legacy behind. That there's something that you did there that will be meaningful and will be continued on after you leave, and try to imagine what that is.
and then I think Dr. Cheda has been answering a whole bunch of questions in the chat, and thank you so much, Natasha, for that. And I think that the other questions, most of the questions were answered regarding the signaling. One question about the geographic location was, what if we signal about a geographic location and then we can say, okay, we have family, there's something there, but what will that impact other states where you don't have that signaling?
Mhm.
You mean if you write it in your experiences and then you signal? Because again, if you signal just in terms of your geographic signaling, if you do signals, only the programs in that geographic region will see your signal. The question of if you put in your experiences that you have or additional information that you have family elsewhere, I do think that people will pay attention to that. Like if you signal the West Coast, but then say you're very close to your family who lives in New York City, that's probably not going to match well. But then I would also, so I think you just have to be strategic. If you really want to be in a specific geographic locale, no matter what, and there's a ton of programs in that geographic locale, then signal and talk about it. But if you aren't so wedded to one specific geographic locale, then I would probably not put specific info in your experiences about a geographic location if you're planning to signal more than one place.
Thank you for that, Dr. Cheda. That was very useful. And then a couple of more questions on experiences. Is it only medical experiences that count, or can it be life experiences that are there too? And if there are multiple customer service kind of experiences, do you just combine it into one experience? I would think that's very individual, but
Yeah, I would say that if you did have say for example, you had a prior career, or a professional experience doing another job or doing something else that was very impactful for you, then you do mention it. But you also may mention some other clinical experiences during medical school as well that were impactful. So I think since we're never unidimensional, we have multiple things that make us who we are. If it was a major experience, even if you were working in a different field, I think it is important. But everybody has to make that personal decision as to what are the most meaningful. And so sometimes you have to sit down and maybe write 10 of them and then figure out what really you think are the most impactful that you want to share.
so I'm just going to read out last two questions. I think we are at time. So one of them is all about, is if you have been rejected by a particular program last year, is it okay to reapply to the same program with an updated CV? And the other question is regarding, is there some major criteria that prevents you from rejection, like having graduated from med school more than 5 years ago? So these are the two questions.
Yes, you should definitely reapply. Every year is a new year, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What's much less so program directors don't know who's going to apply, what the field looks like, how competitive this year is going to be. Yeah, well, and you'll have different different data points to share.
And then in kinds of the major criteria for rejection, kind of, does 5 years out of med school kind of completely put you off the likelihood of getting residency? I don't think that's true, because I don't even remember how many years out of med school I was when I applied for residency.
It was 150, Dr. Deepak.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I mean, it was nearly that. It was very long. So,
No, it's not so much the number of years; it's what you did during those years. If you're active clinically, and even engaged in education, that would be. I think it's all to the good.
Yeah, and I think that it is 6:35, and I see some other last comments in there, and maybe we can just answer it in the chat, or we may have to let go of them. Like there are certain very individualized questions, I think, in here. And I think most of the questions we have answered, and uh, ultimately everything is very individual, and would like to thank Dr. Chow, Dr. Keel, and Dr. Cheda. Thanks so much. And of course, Dr. Christmas, thank you for being there and answering so many questions. And Dr. Kant, having a new baby and being here, and Mary Ellen and Ted, thanks for organizing this. So thanks everyone.